Welcome to Making Pondo and Talking Pondo. Talking Pondo is a podcast where we pick out 2 movies each week and talk about them in detail. Making Pondo is a podcast where we talk to people we've made films with and we discuss all their experiences on set.
All right, and we're back, Marty.
Yes, episode 15.
Episode 15, as they would say in Espanol. 15.
So, depending on how you're listening to these, this is the end of another cycle. Right?
Yes, I believe so.
13, 14, 15, and 13, then next 14, week 15, should be another
making. Pondo, yes.
Or maybe you're just binging all the talkings through. But either way, you're here. You're with us. It's another week. It's me. I'm Marty Catola.
I'm Clif Campbell. And if you're fully confused about the episode count, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. It's
just
all arbitrary.
To the episode. It's totally fine. Yeah, who cares?
We're the ones keeping track, so you don't have to.
Yes, the key is that these are definitely in a sequential order when you listen to them, so that the last movie we talked about is the movie that we just followed up with, and so on. And so last week, Marty,
sometimes the last 3 movies tie in the little 3 in a row, but
true.
Most of the time, they probably don't have any sort of theme. So.
However, when we release the podcast, it's all in the correct sequential order, which means last week we had. You'll have to remind me. Was it That Thing You Do in the Hollywood Nights?
No, I think
it was Almost Famous. It was Almost Famous and Sullivan's Travels.
Sullivan's Travels. Wow, how quickly we forget. I forgot too. We've already done so many of these that I cannot keep track anymore.
Same here.
I like that.
I do too. I like having a record. So we go back and listen. But yeah, those were 2 good movies, and so this week we came up with 2 very different ones.
Mm-hmm.
And you gave me Ed Wood.
Ed Wood from 1994.
Mm-hmm.
I was inspired to give you that one because of That Thing You Do. But then I thought, I'm going to do Almost Famous, the untitled cut. We'll do that one first, and then we'll circle back to Ed Wood.
What about That Thing You Do inspired you to give me Ed Wood?
Probably my favorite part of That Thing You Do. Where he gets to talk to that jazz guy who is his idol. And he tells him to keep on playing. And Ed Wood gets to meet Orson Welles. And he gets that little boost from him.
Sure.
Like,
that's a great scene in that movie, too.
Those 2 scenes kind of reminded me, in a way,
gotcha.
of one's music and one's movies, but it's all that creative process. And apparently that scene never happened. He never met Orson Welles. But it's a nice... for the narrative flow of the movie, it works.
Yeah, it was good. Well, and I like digging into this the way you tie into these things. So it's a lot of fun to hear the way you tie in, because you tie them in interesting ways. Me, I'm much more random and just kind of like, what am I going to throw at this cat next? Where you usually have a plan and you're thinking things through.
And then
which is
you threw at
a
me,
great metaphor for how we work.
Right, and yet the movie you threw at me this week totally ties into Ed Wood in a way. It was Once Bitten from 1985.
It was an accident, but yeah, I had that. That one had been kind of circling along with a couple of others that I've been thinking about and revisiting. In particular, one that stars Lauren Hutton. Hint for those of you who might know what I'm talking about. But yeah, Once Bitten. So 1986 or 85
actually.
85, yeah. Early Jim Carrey movie.
Oh,
very early.
Jim Carrey movie. I mean, he did a few movies for for his native Canada first, I think, that were made for TV. But this was his first leading role in a major theatrical distribution film. And so we want to talk about Once Bitten first.
Yeah, let's jump in, because I think I might have just a touch more to talk about with Ed Wood, so we might as well do it. Once Bitten first.
Yeah, and I think I have more to talk about with Once Bitten. So
let's do it.
There's interesting parallels when you bring up, Jim Carrey and Ed Wood. It's both people were putting in the work, and one of them it breaks at one point, and the other person, also breaks in a different way. So Jim Carrey. In 1985, gets to be in this Once Bitten movie, this teenage sex comedy horror film, kind of a would have been a PG had it been early 80s, but this is like that PG-13, so you get your F bomb and you get a little bit more innuendo, but that's about it. We it seemed like we were getting a movie like this once a week back then, in a way, and you watched them all.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just something else on cable to watch, and
So
another epitome of 80s film right here.
so the film is about, for those of you who are listening, have never seen Once Bitten. A vampire countess needs to drink the blood of a virgin in order to keep her body and beauty eternal. And it
Mm-hmm.
seems that all is hopeless because it's the 80s and kids, there are no virgins anymore. Until she bumps into Mark Kendall, played by Jim Carrey.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of the plot of the movie.
Yes. The first
Um,
film that's even close to being in the horror genre that we've covered on this show.
yeah, that's true. But also, in my opinion, firmly based in the losing your virginity of the
Oh yeah.
80s comedy genre. Like this goes with losing it. This goes with Last American Virgin. This goes with
Oh
all
yeah.
those. I mean, for some reason in the 80s, we were obsessed with losing our virginity. It was really important to the film world, and I guess to people. But losing your virginity was like, and I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a lot of peer pressure in high school about being a virgin, especially in the 80s. But I don't know
And
if there is now. I don't know. I just grew up in the 80s, but
and these are all these movies are all puberty allegories, right?
Porky's, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Porky's, yeah. I mean, there's so many, and I guess they're sort of coming of age, right? Or if you
Mm-hmm.
could call them in a certain way, but
And
upset. Like there was a certain subsect of them that were obsessed with the idea of losing your virginity.
yes.
Like that was the main focal point of the movie, Last American Virgin, losing it. This one in particular, to a certain extent,
Oh
is
yeah.
just about this dude who just will not relent upon his girlfriend and trying to get in her pants.
I mean, the
Period.
part. What is the party animal about? A guy who can't lose
A
his
guy who can't
virginity.
lose his
It's
virginity.
the
Yeah,
ultimate of the tropes. That's
yeah.
what's I think is so funny
You
about
take
that.
you take that trope and you put in the frustration instead of it's never going to happen, and then you get a different movie. Yeah,
Now,
Revenge of the Nerds, kind of the
oh
same thing.
and since this is the sub sect of horror teen sex comedy, well, this and a couple other movies I thought of, they follow the Carrie formula, right? They even end at the prom.
Yeah,
Zap is like that. Oh, you get
yeah,
telekinetic
Zapped. Yeah,
powers. Oh,
Zapped.
Teen Wolf, you become the wolf. Once bitten, you
Yeah.
become the vampire. And
Fast
didn't
Times.
wasn't
Fast
Teen
Times
Wolf
got
the
the
same
yeah.
year as Once Bitten? So we were getting Teen Wolf movie and a Teen Vampire movie in the
Yeah,
same year,
I think that's 85 or 86, one of the two. Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
Once Bitten was released 3 months after Fright Night, so we were having a little bit of a vampire
Yeah, Teen Wolf is
resurgence at the
85.
time.
Yeah, so Teen Wolf, you're definitely right, is 85.
Crazy, right?
That's
But
insane.
that ends at the prom too, right?
Yeah. Well,
I don't.
so did one of the guys. So did
Oh yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
did Better Off Dead. So
So
did I
that
think Pretty in Pink.
Gross
So did
Point Blank.
Gross Point Blank. Yeah, I mean it's insane. Yeah. Well, yeah.
But yeah, that
Um,
made me think. I'm like, oh, if you're like this outsider and you get these weird, you have these powers, you either are, like they're X-Men. I'm a wolf, I'm a vampire, I'm telekinetic. It's scary, right? They're all going through puberty and the changes, and now.
mhm. Oh, okay. I see the metaphor of puberty change. I see.
Mm-hmm.
I gotcha. Um, I
Even
like
the
the
humor with the parents reminded me of Zapped. The I don't know what's wrong with our son.
yeah,
He's turning into a thing.
yeah, very clueless parents. It was a nice opening shot. I one of the things I liked about it was um, first off, it opens with that 80s. Um, it opens with like that 80s theme music that kind of sounds like it was stolen from Flashdance to a certain extent. But there's a great shot. It's just one tracking shot of Cleavon Little moving through the house and
Mm-hmm.
adjusting things,
Yeah. Yeah.
and moving. And it's a really nice shot. Like they put a crane in something and just moved it up and down
Mm-hmm.
and followed him all through this little kind of mansion. And I thought, that's kind of a nice credit shot. I really like that. And then the movie just sort of, it never really kind of goes much higher than that for the rest of
Yeah,
the
it's
film.
just kind of
You
there.
know.
You know, there's
Hmm.
nothing particularly engaging about it. The
Yeah.
charm that it had was back in 1986 when we saw it on cable for the first time, probably,
Yeah.
and a lot of
Yeah.
that has dissipated throughout the years. But there's still something of valid to it. Looking at it now, as there's a lot of weird curiosity historic pieces to it. Uh, for as I'll get into, but talking about that location, there's only a handful of locations. They keep it pretty simple. The
Hmm.
cast is pretty small.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. It's definitely a small budget movie.
yeah, they spend time with like kind of three different storylines for the most part. It's like we're either hanging out with the vampires, we're hanging out with Jim Carrey and his girlfriend, or hanging out with Jim Carrey's friends. Right? It kind
Yeah.
of bounces
Yeah.
between the three of them, and
Yeah.
so that
And Jim.
probably kept everything manageable to shoot.
Yeah. Yeah. Jim Carrey's friends are classic. It's the classic. His his friend. It's always the friend that gives bad advice and has no life experience. That's like, oh, here's what girls want, and here's what makes girls really hot, and here's how you get a girl. And he's the same kind of worthless
Hmm.
virgin who hasn't had the experience that Jim Carrey is. There's
Hmm.
always that dude who's trying all the stupid. He's got that line. I'm a Sagittarius, and let's be
Right.
honest, we're both two mature people, and why don't we put away all the bullshit? It's just like,
Yeah.
oh my god,
Uh,
it's in so many of these movies. It's a trope.
hmm. Exactly. And
Um,
and
and
so,
a well done trope, honestly. I mean, there's a couple lines on it where I laughed. I mean, there was some
oh,
funny
of
stuff.
course, yeah. Uh, oh, what was I gonna say?
Oh, I talked too long and you forgot it.
No,
That's
it'll come
okay.
back. It'll come back around. 'Cause it's right. It's right there with what we were saying with that character. Okay, so we obviously have spoilers here. So
Oh, sure.
I'm gonna ask the big question. Uh, what happened to his friends? The last time I had to go back and rewatch the end of the movie the next day because I'm like, wait a minute. Last time we saw his friends, they were hooking up with the vampires who finally were the ones who went for the line, right? And then we just
They're
never
just
see
gone.
them ever
Yeah, we
again.
just yeah, they're fine. Don't worry about it. They got out. They're fine. Or they're now vampires. It's either
Mhm.
way they're happy.
I
They
looked at
finally
it
got a
more of
piece.
I looked at it more of the hand wave of the humor of the movie of come on, it's a dun dunch. You know, you're not supposed to think about that too hard, but it
Yeah,
was kind
it's
of interesting where it was like, and their storyline just stops.
stops. Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I do appreciate that the movie knew when to get out.
Yeah,
So
it's a lighthearted movie. It's not trying to it's not trying to really cover all the bases. It's
no,
just
it's
trying
not
to
about the plot.
yeah, it's just trying to keep you engaged and have a good time, right? And it hits a lot of God. I mean, if you want a movie that encapsulates the '80s, this is it. Like
No.
it
Oh,
hits so many. I mean, there's literally a scene when they're driving through Hollywood that's just a montage while they're just looking at stuff from the '80s, cars and window shopping and girls, and
oh yeah. There's
it's
it
nuts.
ties into my large body of the presentation I have about Once Bitten, everything that you're saying right there. Which I suppose I should kind of segue into that. So, uh, millennials, by and large, seem to have discovered Jim Carrey with Ace Ventura or The Mask, but we're older.
Right.
We're more Gen X, so we discovered him in things like Once Bitten.
Once bitten.
But the weird thing about it is he was not memorable from this movie at the time. Jim Carrey of the 80s could have been anybody else in any of these other teen sex comedy movies. It was more of just the beats
He
in the
was
movie itself is what we were watching for. We didn't go away from it going, I can't wait to see the next Jim
Jim
Carrey
Carrey movie.
vehicle at
Yeah,
that.
no, that's he was definitely trying to be a leading man kind of
Mm-hmm.
teenage, young actor. I mean,
Right.
there were moments like there are moments when he gets to make those faces, like during the dance sequence where he lifts
Very
his leg up and
small. Yeah,
he lifts
that
his leg
bit.
up and he uses it as a guitar, or when he turns into Dracula during the dream sequence and
Mm-hmm.
he's making those faces. It's like that's the Jim Carrey that's going to be a star.
When he
You can
turns
you
into
can
Bela Lugosi, see, it ties right in.
it,
Just
it does tie right in, but he makes he there are just a few times where he gets to really kind of
mm-hmm.
emote or
Yeah.
be or mug to the camera, where it's like there's the guy you're going to see years later that's going to be a huge friggin' star.
And that's
But you
21
can but you can tell he's reining that shit in. He's really reining it in, trying to be an actor, a leading man, a
well,
leading comedic man. He wants to be Tom Hanks or he wants to be Billy Crystal, that type of thing.
well, to me, what it seemed like is 21-year-old Jim Carrey, fresh off of the canceled Duck Factory, fresh
Duck
off of
Factory,
fresh
that's the
off
name of
of
it.
yeah, fresh off of opening for Rodney Dangerfield on tour, doing his impressionist act because that's what he would do. He
Right,
would just go on stage and do his impressions.
right,
And so
right.
when I watched this movie and then going back and having done this Wikipedia rabbit hole, which was a good one for this, once again, Talking Pondo picks a movie from a prominent person's film career, but we don't start with The Mask or something. We start with Once Bitten. We go in the weird B-side version movie, and it doesn't get much stranger than Jim Carrey's first movie, Once Bitten. I mean, I know he made other movies, but this is the first theatrical one. And to me, watching it, it made it seem like it wasn't so much holding in. It was like, oh, young Jim Carrey hasn't found his instrument yet. It's there,
Mm,
but he doesn't know what to do with it yet. He's trying to be the leading man. He's George Carlin in the suit still, right?
mm,
And so this goes all the way up until he gets on In Living Color about 5 years later.
mm,
And then
mm.
he starts changing his stand up.
Yeah,
It starts becoming more observational, and people are like, "What? I thought you were going to be the impressionist guy." But that's when he, like what we were talking about earlier before the recording, he found that moment where it was like, "Fuck it."
yeah,
And then it all spilled out. And then out
yeah,
comes Ace
yeah,
Ventura and The Mask. And so you're talking about this movie being super 80s. Oh, it
yeah.
so
It's
is.
it's so 80s,
You
bro.
want to know the difference between the 80s and the 90s? Watch
Tell,
Once
tell
Bitten,
me, tell me, Marty.
watch Once Bitten, and then immediately watch The Mask. Not
Oh,
Ace Ventura, but The
yeah,
Mask.
yeah, yeah,
And you are
yeah,
going to see the
yeah.
difference between 80s Jim Carrey and 90s Jim Carrey in the decades themselves.
That's a good call.
It is such a huge shift once
That's
he
a good
just
call.
found what was there and went boom. But this movie,
Mm-hmm.
you get to see just the
I,
he's got a few
I
things.
deliberately felt like he was
He
reining it in. You just think
might have been.
you
He
just
might
think
have
he hadn't
been.
tuned the instrument yet, though.
It was like bubbling, but he didn't know. But I
Mm-hmm.
got to play the straight guy, you know. And I
Yeah,
kept thinking
that's what I
maybe as he
felt like.
turns into the vampire, he's going to get goofier, right? And no, he was still that guy. He makes like his early Jack Nicholson ish face at one point,
He
and
does
so
his De
those
Niro
little things
face.
are
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's the impressionist Jim Carrey. It's like George Carlin in a suit. Still, it's that, you know, like he was saying in that Carlin said in that one thing, uh, where he's standing next to a cardboard cutout of himself as a
Suit.
guy in
Yeah,
the suit, and he's all,
yeah,
this guy, he worked for me at the time, but there was nothing behind him. You know, he
yeah.
was kind of two
Two
dimensional. He was
dimensional.
kind of flat.
Yeah.
There was nothing behind the surface, and it was like once you find that thing that's behind just the basic act, and so
Mm.
yeah, that's why it's very interesting to watch Once Bitten more than anything, as just knowing Jim Carrey's crazy career. This is the same guy who goes on to drive everybody insane while making Man on the Moon,
Yep.
who's in this little
Yep.
vampire movie back in
To the
the day.
part where, yeah, to the point where he gets assaulted on set.
Oh
You
yeah,
know.
it's
Yeah.
crazy. And then
Yeah.
you go, well, I can't. That's completely uncalled for. This crazy motherfucker. And you go, well, yeah, but he was playing Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, but
You playing anybody else, you don't get away with it at all. But you're channeling somebody who is supposed to be nuts, and your method acting that's why he's getting away with this nonsense. But what a
Yeah.
weird performance that was. Not to get into talking about that movie, but it's just
No, no, it's
what a
just
weird
it's
career he had.
for me it's a whole conversation about method actors that we maybe
Yeah.
should have later, maybe during
And it's like,
making Pondo. But yeah,
was he method acting in Once Bitten? It's certainly
I
different.
don't. Maybe that's what. Maybe that's the thing that unlocked it for him. I mean,
Hmm.
there's a Uda. What is it? Uda Hagen's School of Method Acting or something.
Hmm.
I don't know. Stanislavski. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like there was something he hadn't cracked yet.
There's
Hmm.
a there's a mention in the movie of Hollywood weirdos, which I found harkened back very nicely to Ed Wood, where you know at one point his girlfriend is screaming at him, "Y'all are a bunch of weirdos," and all I could think
Hmm.
was, "Yeah, that's the key. Is you find your band of weirdos."
Oh, of course, yes.
But yeah, oh, the classic tranny mistake, which is so prevalent in these movies. It was in
Oh, yeah, because
Coming to
that's
America. It,
sign of an '80s film. Yeah.
it's in Bachelor Party. It's in where it's like, oh, I didn't know you were
Hmm.
a transvestite. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, it's a movie of really bad tropes, but they still kind of make it pretty funny for the
Yeah.
most part.
Hmm.
It's humorous. The biting on the thigh I thought was a funny choice. It's a good gag.
Right.
It, I think this is the third film that we get to see Jim Carrey get a blowjob where we watch his reaction. Once Bitten, uh, Liar Liar,
Oh,
and what's the other one? Oh, Ace Ventura.
well, it makes sense.
The dude's made a career out of that.
His his basis is as a stand-up comedian, so of course he's refining and reusing older material, like playing his leg as a guitar. If it works, you do it,
If it
right?
works, you
And
do
he's
it.
find a
Yep.
way to redo it. He's like, people aren't remembering Once
Hey,
Bitten,
funny's funny, right? It's
right? Yeah.
funny. It's funny. Yeah.
Hmm.
One of the guys in the film has a shirt that says freelance gynecologist. And to me that is the epitome of an 80s movie of this
Oh
genre, of
yeah.
this type.
Hmm.
That to me nailed it so much. I was just like, oh my god, there you go, there's the 80s right there.
Hmm. When they were at the prom, and it's a costume, because this is a Halloween set movie, our
Mm-hmm.
second one after Hollywood Nights, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, you could see somebody wearing that inflatable head costume from the late '70s, early '80s, and I'm like,
Yes.
wow, that thing's, uh, it's permanently on film there. I thought I was never going to see one of those again. I forget what it was called.
The
Uh,
80s nostalgia all over this movie is ridiculous.
oh yeah, and there's Friday the 13th alerts in this movie.
Yes.
Part two, that dude from part two is one of the vampires
Yes.
who's kind of
Mm-hmm.
the dorky guy who
Yep, the
lives in
red-haired dude. Yep.
part two.
Yeah, he
Yes,
slides down the slide going which I
yep,
think is
yep.
hilarious every time I see it.
And then also there's somebody from part five in this movie. When Jim Carrey, they're making out in the very beginning, and the guy knocks on the window.
Yeah, yeah,
The dude
yeah.
from part five who gets his candy bar chopped in half.
I didn't know that. That's hilarious.
Oh, yeah. Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning, probably not being covered anytime soon on this program.
Mm.
Uh, and what was one of my other comments here? The laundromat.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you brought it up because I'm literally staring at a note about it. Dude, I have hardcore party animal vibes all
Oh,
over
yeah.
that laundromat
Oh,
scene.
yeah.
All over that laundromat scene
It's
where I
the
was just like,
same type of
what
laundromat,
the
exactly.
fuck? Like the
And
same
they
type, and
even
they're
do the
he's hiding behind the
newspaper thing.
newspaper. Yes. Oh my god.
Yeah. It freaked. I was like, yeah. What we just said. It makes me stammer thinking about it. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there's a scene in the party animal where they're in a laundromat that has that same wood paneling, and Pondo's hiding behind the newspaper, and you just see his eyes. And that
Yes.
same shot is in Once Bitten.
Same shot, same, yeah, it was like, did you guys see that movie? I mean,
Or
okay.
were there just laundromats that looked that way? I mean, it's even
Hmm.
shot the same way.
Yes. Oh, dude, it's just, speaking of which, the store that his girlfriend works in, the clothing store. That gave
Hmm.
me bachelor party vibes.
Oh yeah.
Gave me so it's like this whole movie is. That's what I'm saying. This whole movie is so 80s interconnected, like nostalgia
Hmm.
trip. It's insane. Um, it also kind of makes no sense. Like it has that 80s sort of make no like she's mad that her boyfriend went off basically that's been trying to get in her pants forever and had sex with some other girl and she's just like, well, I guess it's okay, and they make up so fast. It's not even funny.
Yeah, its tone is a little. Some of these movies, they know what their tone is. It's completely
Mm-hmm.
silly. It's Airplane. Oh, we're doing a little serious. It's Last American Virgin. This one kind of flip flops a little bit between serious and completely goofy. But by the time they get to the dance off sequence,
Yeah,
which is like a vampire
the
grease,
dance off sequence. Um, One of my favorite lines in the movie is a chauffeur, a butler, and a slut who eats buttons. I thought that was a great line. I wrote it down. That and that blood juice scene, like I thought that was really well done because she drains that blood from that meat and puts it on the counter, and you just know at some point that's gonna get drank. And so
Oh yeah,
the whole thing is
oh
like sitting there waiting for it to happen, and he walks away and then finally does. You're like, oh god, that's okay. That was pretty gross.
yeah. It's one of those parts that I remember.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just '80s Jim Carrey was he was too young to be the Jim Carrey of his 30s that could really be that crazy person that made him the big star. But here he was just
He was just a
he's
kid
just hadn't got there yet.
trying to carry a movie.
Hmm.
Did you see them? Did you spot the Megan Mullally sighting in this?
Oh, really?
Yeah, you know, the girl who checks them in at the prom.
Hmm.
That's Megan Mullally.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, early. So that's 85. That's very early. Very interesting. Um, the song at the dance, the hands off song, like it if I don't know, it's like hands off. He belongs to me. He's my private property. Wow. Okay. It's an interesting song, and I remember hearing that on the radio in Tucson when I was a kid. I
Uh-huh.
still remember hearing that.
Yep, that was the '80s. Those were lyrics of the '80s.
Oh,
And
the worst part of the movie, dude. Fag alert. Fags in the
oh,
shower.
I was just gonna breeze right on past it because it's so important. But that's the '80s, you know.
It was both funny and kind of like, oh yeah,
It's like, yeah, that's
oh
just
yeah,
at the
yeah.
time it probably brought the house down in theaters because but now it's like, oh, and you realize that scene doesn't even need to be there. It's
No,
something that comes out of nowhere
you could have done
and is
something
quickly
else.
dismissed,
Yeah.
within 5 to 10 minutes later. But
Some good old '80s homophobia in the middle of it,
yeah,
but it was what I found funny was the scene later where he's chopping onions and crying and talking about how they're gay now and they might as well just move in together. And
hmm
he thinks it's like a disease he's caught. You know, not like an action, but like a thing that's been attached to him, which I found kind of humorous, but at the same
yeah,
time, not
there's that
really.
thinly
Um,
veiled homophobia throughout the movie that ties back into the speed dating when he goes over to the transvestite stage.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, and that you know, I wouldn't say it travels throughout the movie, but that stuff in the '80s was easy fodder for pot shots and
mhm.
comedy. Like it was, well, let's just pop off a gay joke or pop off a tranny joke here, transvestite joke here. I'm sorry, I don't mean to say tranny. That's probably not right, but transvestite joke here,
Well, you're just
and there
saying
you
what.
go. It was an easy, as easy as a minority joke in certain instances. Like make a Chinese joke or whatever. I don't know.
And then
A
at the
lot of
end
that
of
stuff was so prevalent back
and then at the end of the movie, they're just necrophiliacs, right? Because
then.
they're having sex with the vampires, and then we never see those characters again.
Yep. Yep.
You know what? I'm
I
looking up. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I found the movie enjoyably bad.
Right, it gets like a 10% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a
Yeah.
little.
Oh, it was. Yeah. It was like it was. I think the 10% was from the critics, and like the fans was like a 35. Rough.
Mm-hmm. Um, I think I had something else to say about that dance number, but it's probably not
I
important.
cut
I
you
can't
off and
remember it.
talked too much. Sorry about
So,
that.
looking at Jim Carrey's selected filmography on Wikipedia, it goes from a movie called Copper Mountain 1983. That's
Mm,
probably worse. And then we go into Peggy Sue Got Married, Deadpool, Earth Girls Are Easy, Pink Cadillac, which has Timothy Carhart in it. And then he's off to the races at that point with his string of hits: Ace Ventura, The Mask, Dumb and Dumber. Just those three alone. Remember
yeah.
when he was getting all those one deal after the other?
Oh yeah.
Oh, another interesting thing about him. Uh, he kept trying to get on Saturday Night Live over and over again. They put Charles Rocket on instead of him back in '80. And
Wow.
then he didn't make the cast with Dana Carvey and Phil Hartman in '85. And then he hit In Living Color and boom. But
Wow.
it is interesting to see how Adam Sandler and Jim Carrey, uh, both appreciated and reviled publicly, have had kind of a similar career where they both just were scraping through the '80s, just working. And it wasn't until the '90s that they both just, boom,
Took off.
completely broke out around the same time. Could do no wrong for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think he fumbled a little bit in the early '90s with like Batman Forever and Cable Guy, but then he just came back strong with Liar Liar and
Oh, yeah.
Man on the Moon and Me Myself and Irene is
Mm-hmm.
a kind of a cult classic. Bruce Almighty was a freaking huge hit.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
People love
and then he
Eternal Sunshine. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he goes into kind of a weird sort of phase where he's just kind of
Yeah.
doing whatever he wants to
You can do
do.
whatever you want
23.
then.
But
Mm-hmm.
then he comes back with Yes Man. In another movie he did, which I think we'll probably catch her later, which I really liked, was I Love You, Philip Morris, which I thought was
Mm.
it was
I
kind
don't
of
know
like
if I've ever seen that.
it's like a I don't know, the best way I can say it is like a like
That's the cigarette.
Catch
Oh,
Me If You Can with a gay vibe
that
type of
that
thing.
was a good movie.
It was very good. I really enjoyed the story on it. I thought it was really good, and the fact that it was rooted in some true elements is, well, Jesus. Now
Mm-hmm.
we're on to another film. So back to Once Bitten.
Well,
It's
it's
all tied together, right?
part of Jim Carrey conversation.
Yeah, he's such a talent. The guy is just a friggin' talent.
Mm-hmm.
Even in this movie, he's likable. He carries the movie. He's in a lot of it. I mean, the movie's throughout hit just he's carrying this
Mm-hmm.
film along with Lauren Hutton and poor Cleavon Little. Where the hell did he come from in this
Yeah.
movie?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, did he have a bill to pay or something? I mean,
It was the '80s, all the way back in the Night of the Comet year of 1985. Now, Jim Carrey and Johnny Depp have never made a movie together,
oh, I'd love to see that.
but
I'd love to see that. That'd
their
be
one
terrific.
degree of separation is in our next film, and that's Bill Murray.
Oh,
Bill
yeah,
Murray is in Dumb and Dumber 2, apparently. A movie I
really?
saw that I have no memory of. But anyways, I was like, oh, so I guess they've worked together, and I'm wondering, hey, is this we did the movie because we finally got a chance to work together, and that probably won't happen again, and who cares about the quality of the film? Because boy, Dumb and Dumber 2 was, whew, I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
It's not the greatest film in the world. But anyways, so that was what I felt about Once Bitten. What am I giving
Make a note to
Once
give that to
Bitten?
you when you give me a bad movie, Dumb and
I'll have to save Copper Mountain as a blind pick. Why did I
Dumber.
get this one? I don't know.
Once
I
Once
mean,
Bitten for me was an easy 2 stars.
yeah, I'm thinking two as well. I think we're meeting in the same spot on
I mean, it was funny enough, and it moved fast. I mean, it's 83 minutes of film tops, along with credits and all that. So
that. Oh,
it
that
moved fast enough, did what it was supposed to do. It's well made. Um,
the end
there's
theme
no
song reminds me of September by Earth, Wind and Fire.
yeah. Once Bitten September. Yeah,
It
I
feels
guess
like
so.
it's
Yeah,
gonna go off into the. Like we used to do a mashup.
Oh, my other favorite thing about that movie, one of my favorite things about that movie was there's a few. Just the fact that my favorite things about the movie is how much it invoked the '80s. And one of the things in the '80s was you had to have a theme song that included the name of the movie to a certain extent.
Oh yeah, yeah. Now
Ghostbusters,
that's a title song.
title song, totally. Anyway, So Ed Wood was our
Ed
next film.
Wood. Once again, we don't jump into, you know, a main movie of somebody's career. We haven't done a Tim Burton movie, so we're not going to start with, Batman or something like that, or the Batman movie that Jim Carrey was in. Hey, they didn't make that one together. That's kind of weird now I think about it. No, we start with Ed Wood, the weird movie among weird Tim Burton movies. But I like this one a lot more than a lot of his weird movies, to tell you the truth. So Ed Wood is about the filmmaker Ed Wood in a fictionalized narrative.
Yeah, I mean it's supposed to be kind of a biopic, but he takes liberty
Mhm.
with
It's
some of the story.
about the Bella Lugosi years, right? Have you
Yeah,
ever
it's
seen another movie that's about the making of three films?
no,
This one's
no,
it.
and
Glenn
it's one of
Glinda,
it's
Bride of the Monster, and Plan 9 from Outer Space.
it's one of the things that I love about the movie. It's an ambitious but troubled movie director Ed Wood Jr. tries his best to fulfill his dreams despite his lack of talent. Um, it's one of the things I like about the movie. I love movies about making movies. So this one caught me real early in the film where I was just like, fuck, I just love movies about this type of stuff. The struggle of making a movie, some of the comedy of it. Sarah Jessica Parker floating down as the angel early on in the play was. I was just like, is that Sarah? I'd forgotten she was in this. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and early on, she has to say the line, "Do I really have a face like a horse?" which was hysterical to me. Um, and right away in the film they start digging into his cross dressing. So I liked the film. It was to me, you say it's a weirder Tim Burton movie. To me, it's a normal Tim
Well,
Burton
that's what
movie.
I mean by that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Because
it's
his normal
and
movies
it's
are the weird ones.
are the weird ones.
Uh,
Yeah, I hear you. But he stripped away all that stuff, all the Tim Burton artistic fanfare, and just made a film about a hero or somebody that he admires. Um, and it was I really enjoyed it.
mm-hmm.
Like I haven't seen it in a long time, and I was like, oh damn, this is probably my favorite Tim Burton film to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's mine as well. Mm-hmm.
It's really good. Landau
Oh,
just
yeah.
destroys the scenery in that film. He's
You can see why
amazing.
he won the Oscar for that one.
Absolutely deserved it.
So the movie wisely chooses to just focus on the time period where Ed Wood met Bela Lugosi and then got inspired to
Hmm.
make these three movies.
Right.
It doesn't really focus on the everything else, but throughout its set dressing and its subtext, it kind of hints on everything else that Ed Wood did in his career. You get a poster for Pin Down Girls in the background at one point,
Right.
which is Racket Girls for you MST
Right.
fans, a movie that he apparently wrote, but we don't have verification of it. And then like the Swami guy at the party is reminiscent of Night of the Ghouls, which is the follow up to Plan 9, which he
Right.
basically it's kind of like part
Right.
2 to Plan 9, but
Yeah. And
there's
they
no
talk about
reason
that, I
to,
think, in the credits at the end.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
no reason to really talk about that in the movie because
Hmm.
it's not about Bela Lugosi. Like he met him, and obviously not like how they did in the movie. He didn't meet him while he was shopping for coffins or something. That's just a nice sequence. But it seemed like he was kind of this muse to where he made Glen or Glinda, which is like it's almost like a William S. Burroughs type chop up a book and paste the sentences back together with the stock footage mixed together. Luc Besson does this shit years later with Scarlett Johansson. They call it Lucy. It's the same type of filmmaking in a way where you're taking that weird stock footage of random stuff and then and it's almost like, is this an art house film? What the hell is he doing? So by the time you get to Plan 9 at the end, he's kind of inspired one more time to take this little piece of footage and kind of do that again of like put together nonsense, and that's why that one's more endearing. I think that's why Bride of the Monster, even though it's the most troubled production in the middle, it's probably the least interesting because it's not the one that had all the really wackiest shit. I mean, obviously, stealing that octopus is pretty fucking great.
It's fantastic. Yeah, that's really great. For me, I mean, I so to me, what it felt like honestly was two people who were using each other. Lugosi was broke, he was a junkie, and
That's
nobody
what's
gave
been
a
talked
shit.
about too. Yeah.
And Ed was a guy who needed a star. He needed a name. He
Hmm.
approaches this guy to make a picture, and the guy's like, I don't want, get, I don't care if you dress in women's clothes. That makes you the best director for Glenn or Glinda. Get the hell out of here. And so he comes back and says, I've got a star. And the guy goes, okay. And later invests everything he has to make the picture and then tells Ed, I'll kill you if I ever see you again. Right. And so, like, to me, this is Ed kind of, and I mean, it's two parasites sort of leeching off each other, right?
Hmm.
It's a symbiotic relationship to a certain extent.
Yeah, they
Like,
romanticize it, but
yeah,
yeah.
I need you, you need me, right?
Yeah,
And I think,
Lugosi's son apparently always thought that it was a user relationship, and a lot of the other people were like, no, they were genuinely friends, and he helped him through a lot of his addiction
Mhm.
part. But I know
uh,
what you mean as far as the creation of the
yeah, well,
Skid Row
not
movie.
the,
Yeah.
yeah, not the creation, but just the fact that, hey, look, I have a name, it opens doors, I can talk to people, it
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
value. I can, especially back in old Hollywood, a name was a big deal. It would drag people
Hmm.
in and put butts in seats, right? And so, and that's why he's able to get a full house for the Plan 9 screening, which I'm sure went pretty poor. I mean, Jesus, that by the way, screening wise, that's the most hostile screening I've ever seen in a film
Yeah.
ever.
It's Tim
Whew.
Burton making an interesting sequence out of something that was probably a non-event in real
Hmm.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, but
There's nobody
still, just
there.
from a dramatic angle, wow.
Yeah. Now that was a
Um,
premiere.
More than anything, what I caught from the movie is that Ed Wood's a fan. You know,
Hmm.
I mean, he loves movies, he loves actors, and he's a fan. And I think that's what limited his filmmaking ability, right? Like, fans probably shouldn't make films because they're fans. They're not really interested in the filmmaking process of the art. They're interested in kind of being involved with people who are in the business.
Hmm.
You
It makes me think that he was a producer. I think he was wearing too many hats because he had no choice. But he had the budget and been able to do only one role, perhaps,
know? Hmm.
as somebody who gathers all the people together because he had the talent of doing that. Maybe, but I know what you mean. Apparently, according to Wikipedia, he was doing scripts and pilots back in the late 40s after he got out of the military, before he put together the troupe that did the play in the beginning of the movie. So he
Hmm.
had already been had experience, making stuff. And
Sure. Oh yeah.
also Bela Lugosi was getting work at the time too. He had to turn down like Jailbait because he was
Hmm.
already had another offer. So they do play it up a little bit
Yeah.
of how
Yeah. Yeah.
desperate it was. Yeah.
Well, it's not that Ed was desperate. He was just trying to move up the ladder, right? Like, he's trying to
Exactly.
make a picture. He's trying to get people attached, and a name
Hmm.
will attach. He seemed to lose his mind trying to fit Lugosi into that first film. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. He's the thing that he's using to get the picture made, but at the same time, like, it's just he's really stretching that film to fit Lugosi into it.
Hmm.
And
Like you see the
again,
birth of ironic film viewing when. Well, anyways, go ahead. Go
oh, I was just going to say my favorite line. You've surrounded yourself with a bunch of weirdos. I,
ahead.
I feel that to the bottom of my soul. Like, that's
Seriously.
exactly what I've done. You know.
Hmm. Like he takes Glenn or Glinda to that first uh, potential distributor, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
hey, Entourage alert! This is the guy who is. They're trying to get the movie made in one of the early Entourage episodes.
Very true. Very true.
We
Yeah.
have Entourage with that guy, Martin Landau, obviously Entourage. If you don't like
Mm-hmm.
Martin Landau's performance in Entourage and you hate the rest of the show, I understand that, but you can't hate Martin Landau's performance in Entourage. My God, he's great in that show. Hate the rest of it, but his character in that is awesome. And then we also have Sarah Jessica Parker, who's Sex and the City, so you get that mixed into.
There you go.
So you get
It's
all
an
those.
HBO film.
Yeah, HBO. And so he's trying to sell the movie to that guy, and he leaves the film there with him, and he starts laughing as he's watching the movie, right? Like, oh, is
Yeah.
this a put on? And it's like, this is the birth of the first ironic film viewing. So they're kind of sneaking that in as to what Ed's movies would
What
become, like
Ed's
the
movies
camp
become later.
quality and
That's
the,
a good
you
point.
know,
That's interesting. I didn't even catch that. Yeah, that's a good point.
and it's like, but he wasn't trying to make a comedy, but at the same time, he was just trying to get the money to make the next thing. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, that was Stanley DeSantis who played that part. 1994, it's the same year as Priscilla. So, what an interesting progressive year, because now here we are with another, you know, trans rights movie in a way.
Yeah, I mean, Ed surrounded himself with a lot of people that were, I guess, considered fringe back in the 40s and 50s. Bunny is not a normal type of character, and to put him in the film was, and to put him into Plan 9 was a big choice, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, and that's, he puts his friends in the films. I mean,
Right.
it's a very, again, he creates an entourage. He creates a group. Tor, Bunny, Vampira,
Mm-hmm.
Lugosi, the two guys who play the cops that have their
Oh
own,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
fan club and all that kind of stuff. These guys that are, constantly around always that he relies on. Chriswell, you know, yeah, Ed raising the money and for the flick and helping his friend, that resonates with me. That whole building an entourage really, that feels very genuine. I
Mm-hmm.
noticed that his car gets worse and worse throughout the film, like kind of
Oh
like a
yeah,
metaphor,
it's
kind of
smoking.
like a metaphor for his career.
Oh yeah, the
Um,
cops, Paul Marco and Conrad Brooks. Conrad Brooks was around until about just a couple of years ago, and he was the
mhm,
last of the Ed Wood crew, and now they're all off into
all gone.
eternity. But he was still doing the con circuit and shit. So
Wow.
what an interesting conversation that would have been.
Uh, Geoffrey Jones being in the film is slightly problematic for me, um,
Yeah.
being who he is. But we'll skip over that for the most part. He had some child pornography
Hmm.
issues, I guess. But yeah, so you know, every time I see his face, I'm always like,
Yeah, it's always it's one of those things that sours things a bit.
yeah.
Even though this was made quite a bit of time before any of that was discovered, doesn't change anything, and
Well, and
what happens.
I read off he got off on a pretty. He basically admitted it. They dropped most of the charges, which was not that
Mm.
he basically it was, I guess, photography and not whatever. But anyway, who cares? Fuck him. Um, the I love the scene where he's talking to the girl in the thing, and she's like $70,000. That's so cheap. And then they start filming the movie. And he's like, "Hey, I need the money for the set." She's like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
you should pay him." And he's like, "What are you talking about? Give me the money."
It's like I need it
She's like,
now. It's like I
"Yeah, I
gave you
gave you
everything
three
I
hundred
got. I
dollars." Mm-hmm.
gave you my $300.
That was hilarious. And of course, that's the thing that causes his rift with his girlfriend too, because he gives her
Yeah,
part away, right? At the
yeah.
same time.
I mean, they weren't
Um,
exactly having the most solid relationship anyway at that point,
true, true.
and she
Well,
had to
when you,
go and be with Elvis. So,
yeah, write songs for Elvis. Yep.
hmm,
Um,
she was around until about a decade ago too.
wow.
Hmm.
I love that the cameraman admits that he's colorblind at one point, where he's
Oh
just like,
yeah.
I don't know, the dark gray one. That one looks good.
That guy did a lot of famous B movies, and one that stood out to me when I was looking at his list was because Ed used the same cinematographer DP on almost everything that he shot,
Yeah,
even some of the
yeah.
later, you know, pseudo sexploitation films that he did. But this guy shot Project Moonbase. If anybody is
Ah,
a season one MST fan,
interesting.
like wow, I always like the seeing where the below the line people intermingle in these old school B movies. Oh, another one of the interesting things is when you were talking about how he was putting together his entourage. One of the deleted scenes that's more interesting is he goes to Tor's house for dinner with his family,
Uh-huh.
and so Tor excuses himself to go to the restroom, and then he's talking. Ed is talking with Tor's wife, and she's like, "Oh, I don't really like what you do with my husband in these movies. You humiliate him." And he's like, "Oh, I don't, you know." She's like, we don't like to see him as the monster." And it's like, that's interesting that was, you know, they don't obviously delete a scene, but it's more of that
right.
kind of
Well, and then he gets
what you're
the
saying,
detective part later on in Plan 9, right?
right?
He gets to carry the dialogue. Why did you give him the dialogue? He's inaudible. Get out of here. Leave me alone.
She doesn't talk.
She doesn't talk.
Get the
Bela
dialogue
Lugosi's
right.
dead. This one here over here won't do it. What do you want me to do?
Somebody's got to do
There's a scene in there where he keeps settling for bad shots and justifying why he does it,
it.
and
Yeah.
I think it's a great that
Mm-hmm.
scene right there explains Ed
Yeah.
completely. Take the bad shot, print it, and then justify why it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably the worst thing as a film. I've done it, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
worst thing you can do as a filmmaker
You're
is
just
to
trying to
try
get it
and
in the can. Yeah.
just get it. Don't just get it in the can, man. Get it right in the can. Otherwise, you're gonna be in the room regretting the shit out of it
Don't,
later.
don't you want to do that takeover? Baldy
No,
had
it was perfect.
getting through the set. No, he would have that problem every day. That
Hmm.
would be a constant struggle for Lobo.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
real.
yeah,
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah.
it's so funny because when he's going into production of Plan 9 in the beginning, he's all, "This is going to be the ultimate Ed Wood production. No compromises." And it's
Yep.
like, oh, yeah, well, we already know
All the
that
way
that's not
through it.
going to happen.
All the way through it. He just compromises all the way through it just to get it done, man. Um, there's a line there. I want the movie to end with a big explosion, and all I could do was laugh and think, yeah, and a giant spider.
Giant spider.
You
Yeah.
know, just a giant spider.
The one scene that I really felt this time through was the taxing nature of those grueling, no budget, late night Bride of the Monster shoots. Eddie, I
Have a
don't know if I can handle another night shoot. And
yeah,
if you've ever done long
yeah,
productions, you know what he's talking about.
yeah. There's a
Obviously, his
line.
problem was worse, but still, it's a gruel.
Yeah, there's a line. There's a line. The scene after that where he says, "Have a nice cup of Joe, you'll feel better." And it's like, oh, night shots followed by morning shot. Oh, that's just rough.
Mm-hmm.
So rough.
What do you mean you didn't take the motor? But you didn't say anything about a motor for the octopus. And so he gets all smacked out. Now he's ready to go. And
Yep. Yep.
that's another one of my favorite parts is where the guy asks him for an autograph before the shot, and he brings up
Yeah.
Karloff, and he gets all pissed off.
Gets
And
all
he's all,
pissed off.
"Do you want a moment to go outside and maybe?"
Yeah, he's
You
like,
know,
no.
he's all, "Bullshit! I'm ready right now." Yeah, I feel that too. You know, just roll the
Yeah.
damn camera. You know, I can channel this.
Filmmaking is not about the tiny details; it's about the big picture. No, it's really about the tiny details, dude. It really
Mhm.
that's the difference. It really is. Well, that everybody can see this isn't a grave. That headstone got knocked over. You
Mm-hmm.
know, nobody's going to notice that. Yes, yes, they will.
Everybody's
They
gonna.
really will. Everybody's going to notice that.
We're gonna do it my way, my vision. Now, I don't know if he was actually cross dressing on set for those movies, but for his later movies, he definitely was. Once he gets to The Sinister Urge in
Right.
1960, that's the beginning of the
Wow.
sexploitation films in a way, which kind of makes sense, you know.
Yeah.
And then you get to Orgy of the Dead in 65, which still has Criswell in it. I think at this point, the last of his black and white troupe are starting to fall away in these movies. And then after that, he goes into more of the. It's kind of considered golden age of porn now because when it came out, you know,
Hmm.
when porn was still being considered like this can be dramatic and we're going to talk about deep throat in a philosophical way and all the
Right.
early
Right.
70s are such a weird time.
Yeah. Well, you had to the Supreme Court ruled that pornography was any kind of sexual act that had no artistic merit. So you had to put some artistic merit in there to get the sexual act in, right? Otherwise, it was just pornography. Otherwise, if it had all those things, then it was considered art, and
Mm-hmm.
you could show it anywhere. But if it didn't have those things, it was porn.
Right.
And porn is banned. Porn is bad.
And so the 70s were a rough time for Ed. There's a reason why there's not a part 2 to this movie. Although, you remember that movie Heartbreak Hotel?
Yes.
That's what part 2 of Ed Wood should be. These filmmakers find Ed Wood in like 1977 and they jazz him up and then they make a low budget movie and then of course
That'd be great. I'd watch that.
Here. But that's the Ed Wood part 2. You can't steal it. We have it copywritten on here if we decide.
That's right. All ideas coming out of here are copywritten. Don't you dare.
But yeah, more of his friends of the troupe kept passing away throughout the 70s until at age 54.
Yeah, he died. Early.
He died in 1978, penniless, kicked out of his house.
Yeah,
a lot of his archives thrown in the trash. He was working on a biographical screenplay based on the last years of Bela Lugosi. And that draft got thrown in the garbage by his landlord who threw him out.
Wow.
Apparently things were getting pretty bad for him towards the end. Not taking care of yourself, drinking a lot. Both him and Kathy were both really kind of violent alcoholics, apparently. Somebody who was writing a book about him came over to interview him in 1976. And at the beginning of the interview, everything was okay. He was sober. They were talking about Bella. Ed started getting more and more drunk throughout the interview until he went into the kitchen, smashed a bottle of wild turkey, and then tried to attack the guy, claiming that he should be the one writing the book. The interviewer kind of pushed him to the side, and then he kind of collapsed, and the guy said, "Okay, Ed, I guess that was our last interview. I'll see you." So things were not exactly going well, but, we didn't have our mental health systems. Obviously, he might have had PTSD from whatever happened in wartime. Things go untreated, and also having to live life as an outsider back then, he probably had a lot of pent-up things that he just wasn't dealing with, and he died just before the Golden Turkey Awards turned him into the worst director of all time. And people start caring about his work. So in the end, even though they all kind of had rough, sad lives, and he wakes up and he's like, "I'm worried it's never going to get any better than this," the art continues to this day. More and more people know about Plan 9 than ever. With people watch more Rift movies now. The whole B movie thing. When we were kids, it was there, but it was a little more obscure.
Well, when we were kids, it was there because it was an oddity. It was a thing to be gawked at, and I think it still is. And that's not necessarily, look, art is getting away with it, right? So
yeah.
If you're getting away with it, you're getting away with it, according to Andy Warhol. But I mean, and then of course you begin to say, well, how great of an art is it? And his is pretty low down there.
And yet there's an enduring quality.
But there's an enduring type of thing to it. Yeah.
You talk about sci-fi B movies in the 50s. He's part of the conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
But they're not great films, but yeah.
No. Yeah. Well, to me, Burton really turned him into a kind of a hero. Like he really kind of heroed him up, and that last crane shot at the end of the movie there, where the entourage kind of says it all. He found his clan and the people he was going to work with for a while, and you kind of get that American Graffiti ending too with the credits.
It actually does kind of work for that one because the real.
I enjoyed it.
So yeah,
I enjoyed it. It's for me. It's probably one of the Tim Burton films that I would go and watch. Besides Beetlejuice or maybe Pee-wee. There aren't a lot of Tim Burton films I'll watch over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I just don't. I'm not a big fan of Nightmare Before Christmas. And
I'm not either.
He goes off into a very weird scissors and stitches phase. That's just not for me.
I'm glad they let him do this black and white, and it seems like they pretty much let him alone. It wasn't a financial success, but it wouldn't have been Ed Wood if it had been a financial success.
That scene where Lugosi's going to shoot him, and he's like, "I'm on your side, Bella."
Right.
That's some powerful stuff, and I can see that's where Landau got the Oscars right there in that scene. He nailed it. It was fantastic.
And the only other movie that Tim Burton's made that comes close to having this kind of vibe, and I think he does himself better justice with it because all of his Tim Burtonisms are stripped away. While there's a few left in Ed Wood, by the time he gets to the movie Big Eyes, he's just doing the story part without any of the stuff. And if you blink, you might not even realize you're watching a Tim Burton movie. I only watched that one once, but I did like that one quite a bit. Maybe one day eventually, when we run out of things to talk about, I might
Who
bring
knows?
that one up again. But that was a good one as well for
It
extra
was.
credit. Anybody out there?
That was a good one.
So that's two biopics that Tim Burton has made because that's based on
Two
reality as well. Mm-hmm.
two biopics. Well,
So yeah, Ed Wood made some hardcore porn in the 70s, and that's all she wrote. Very weird. Very weird. You can read about all the rest of the horrible stories of harsh living in Hollywood in the 70s on his Wikipedia entry, which I've only scratched the surface of for this podcast. But it's an interesting comparison to the movie. And I am curious about the book that was written about him. That's what the basis of the movie is. And I've seen a
yeah.
few documentaries too where they interview, the real people and stuff. And that stuff's always gives you another cue and everything. It's funny how horror hosts were always there too. Vampira, right there from the beginning, talking shit about these old movies. It's like that's always been part of the thing, it seems.
I love the fact that she was like, "Can you just make my part as small as possible?
Mm-hmm.
Like, just don't give me any lines. Just make it. I just
Right.
please make it as small as possible. It's really funny.
So her name is Lisa Marie, right? That actress.
Yeah.
It's interesting because that was just to briefly touch on that when she was married to Tim Burton. She was in every one of his movies, and you get up to Planet of the Apes where he hooks up with Helena Bonham Carter, and then suddenly he's putting out movies that aren't that great because I guess his muse switched or something, and so it is weird when that happens when, somehow, even on a large level, you manage to be like, no, this person is being in the movie because they are my significant other, even if I know deep down there's probably somebody
Probably
else
not the
who
right
might be
answer. Yep.
better.
Probably somebody better. Yep.
But love
Yep.
is blind, people. Rob Zombie has done it to us many times.
Oh man,
But
so many
it's
times.
also interesting because you don't see anybody else hiring Sherry Moon Zombie. You never saw anybody else hiring Lisa Marie. And not like
Well,
she didn't do a serviceable job. She did do a good job, but it is interesting how that works out sometimes.
but that's a classic trope in Hollywood: is
Mm-hmm.
the director forcing the actress in that he wants.
Well,
That he's
kind of
usually
similar
sleeping
to
with.
the Ed Wood story where she
Mm-hmm.
paid for the part that he thought, and hey, that part was written for
There you
me.
go. Yep.
Well, life resembles art, resembles life, resembles art. Well, when you find your tribe, you stick with them, and sometimes other people leave, but then you find other people who are a better fit for the tribe, and then they stick with it. So, Ed Wood, an
Very true.
interesting movie. I'm going to give it 4.5.
It's a solid 4 for me. I think it's a solid movie. It's it's not one that I put on like that I reach for.
Yeah,
But every time I catch it, I'm like, damn, that's a good movie. It's well made. So yeah, I'd say it's a solid 4 for me.
yeah, it really understands what the heart of filmmaking, the
Yeah,
desire, and all that
yeah,
is,
yeah.
and just the
Especially
whole
when you're coming up from where we're coming from, it's
yeah.
like, yeah, that's a lot of shit that rings true there and feels genuine.
Much like some of the other movies we've recently covered, back to even like Night Riders and things, it's about putting together that group of outsiders to create the outsider art that people think you're crazy for making. And I just relate to that so much. Obviously, people are starting to like our stuff more, which is cool, but it's always going to have that outsider off the grid thing. Another movie that
Right.
reminds me of that is Pecker, because
Ah,
he
yeah.
he gets famous taking his pictures of his crazy friends, and then they like him, but they don't necessarily like his wacky group, which you kind of understand. But then, well, Pecker is for another day.
True.
You can
True.
watch that one. I won't spoil that one for you today.
We'll get to John Waters eventually.
Yeah, we haven't even
We haven't even
begun to scratch the surface.
yeah,
But
we haven't even scratched the surface.
anything else on either of these two films?
No, no, I think we covered it. I honestly I would watch either film again. I like
Yeah.
if Once Bitten came on, I'd be like, oh, this thing, and kind of chuckle my way through it. If I
Hmm.
had seen it recently, I probably wouldn't watch it again. But if it'd been a couple of years, I'd be like, oh, I remember this little
Yeah.
weird little film. But Ed Wood is that's a solid piece of cinema. I really think it's probably one of Tim's better films.
Hmm. I think so too. Yeah. I saw it in the theater when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really care for it much. I was too young. And then, or as the
Interesting.
years have gone by and we've done more of the filmmaker thing, so much of it rings so much more true than
Yeah, yeah.
obviously Edward Scissorhands and stuff like that. These are good movies, but they don't hit me the same way.
Yeah, yeah. And I think again because we make films, this one has a little bit more of an impact.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so what do you got for me next week?
Oh, okay. So next week, uh, so we're going back to when we watched A Knight's Tale,
Uh huh.
and I had all these ideas for other movies to watch,
Uh
and I
huh.
was like, okay, what happens if we watch movies about jousting? Yeah, we did that.
Right.
Gonna watch more movies about Chicago, maybe at some point, because I was running scared. That was tied into that one too. Uh, but what else did A Knight's Tale end up spouting? Oh, it ended up having us watch Night Riders, which ended up having us watch the Hollywood Nights, and then somehow That Thing You Do got thrown in there, and then the next thing you know, we're off watching Almost Famous and Ed Wood, and so finally I can come all back around and give you that Paul Bettany movie I was talking about.
Okay.
Your movie next week is Master and Commander.
Oh no shit.
Yes.
Really?
Mhm.
Okay. Well, that'll
I
be an
like
easy
that.
watch.
Yeah, I like that movie.
I'm I'm a huge fan of
I figured I'd surprise you with that. A nice palate
that's
cleanser. Yeah.
yeah, you know me. I've read every book written by Patrick O'Brien. I'm a huge fan of the Aubrey Maturin series. So Maturin, however you say it. So that will be an interesting, easy watch. Well, thank you so much.
Mhm.
What an easy film.
I've only watched it once, so this will be my second. Well,
Interesting.
obviously, if I've only watched it once.
So I'm going to harken back to an early film, and I'm going to keep a theme going for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to introduce the first horror movie.
Oh, you beat me to the punch. Okay.
This is
I
starring
thought you might.
Emilio
Oh,
Estevez,
we're back to Emilio. Okay.
and it's called Maximum Overdrive.
Oh, we're doing Maximum Overdrive, our first Stephen King movie. See, once again, entering Stephen King with the only one he directed.
Mm-hmm.
Weird one.
I decided it was like, you know what? We've been talking about off and on about horror for a while. I thought I'd kind of surprise you. And by the way, the other ones, that's a great choice. So this will be interesting. I haven't seen Maximum in years. Years.
I watched it a few years ago with the Jonah Ray commentary track,
Hmm.
which was pretty interesting, but it'll be nice to watch it, just by itself. We have a nice Blu-ray copy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I have a nice Blu-ray copy too, so that'll be perfect.
yeah.
So yeah, I thought that'd be interesting. Rather than jumping into like a Stephen King Carrie or
Right.
Christine or Shining, let's do a weird one like Maximum.
Yeah. It doesn't get much weirder than that.
You know, yeah.
ACDC next time.
Our first Romero movie is Night Riders. Our first King movie, Maximum
Yeah.
Overdrive. Why
And
not?
you could somebody out there might go, well, Stephen King and Tabitha King were in Night Riders. Yeah, but that's
True, but
cameo.
that's cameo.
Not like it was
It's
Creep
cameo.
Show. That was
That's right. That's right.
wow. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I thought I'd throw.
I was obsessed with that one time.
Yeah, I thought I'd come out of left field with that one. See what you thought.
Wow. And back to 1986, the year I saw everything.
Yeah, I feel like we'll have to eventually get
Great
out of
year.
this '80s rut that we're in. We'll get
Oh,
there.
but it's building blocks. These
Yeah,
are
yeah.
the essentials at the beginning of the podcast.
I've got some very interesting ones that are new releases that I just picked up on Blu-ray that I haven't seen
Right?
yet. So I might give you a couple of those as blind picks, and we'll
Ah.
just watch them.
Yeah, I'm thinking once we get into season 2, I'll probably start sprinkling in some blind picks, kind of semi often. Just I'm getting some
Well,
of
we
the
didn't.
early ones out of the way that I really wanted to talk about, and then it's like let's have some fun and throw in some new stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we didn't even talk about the fact that Sullivan's Travel was a blind pick, and that was a
Oh,
really good
exactly.
one.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic blind pick. I really enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right then. I guess till next week. It's wow, Paul Bettany
What
and
year is
Master
Once
and
Bitten?
Commander and Maximum Overdrive, huh?
Is that like 03, 04?
Master and Commander.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it's a little bit later than that, isn't it? 05,
I
06?
can't I can't remember. The odds are a blur.
03. Well, so we're both wrong. So
Oh well, so
there you go. 03. Interesting.
okay.
All right. Well, at least we're in the aughts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, man. Well, until then,
Yeah.
talk to
See
you
you
soon, Marty.
next time.